Holy crap. Almost got mowed down by a... What is happening? Do they not know what direction they're going? Nope. Anyway. Hi everybody, Steve the Amateur Historian, coming to you from Alphabet District. Good. I was hoping I'd bump into a sign. I sometimes mix up where Nob Hill and the Alphabet District end. I'm in the Alphabet District. Thank you, sign. Nob Hill and Alphabet District are like two of the predominant neighborhoods just west of downtown Portland. And without getting mowed down, I am trying to get to generally 17th Avenue between Flanders and Gleason for a fresh new episode of Historic Murders of Portland. Can I get... Yes, I can't get through this way. That was gonna suck if 17th didn't go through here. Yeah. Here's 17th and Flanders. I go right this way. The locations always sneak up on me. This is right where I want to be. Alright, so once again, I am on 17th, directly between Flanders right over there, and then Gleason right down here. Right smack dab in the middle. Now you see this lot space behind me. That is exactly where the home of George Chamberlain was. Now, this case kind of threw me a little bit because there was a prominent political figure in the state of Oregon named George Chamberlain. So when I looked up George Chamberlain around the time that this case took place, I got like ceaseless results. I was like, what was this, like the most iconic murder of all time? Then I realized, no, there was just another George Chamberlain who was a lot more well known than the George Chamberlain whose house used to be roughly where this lot is directly behind me. But for our sake, it's December 14th, 1910. Now, George Chamberlain, this particular one, he ran a movie theater down around, I think, First and Alder, right where the Morrison Bridge kind of starts coming down. And he was married, he had a wife. I was never able to find her wife because newspapers back in the day, I guess, thought it was more stoic to just refer to women as Mr. or Mrs. such and such, their husband's name, when really it kind of deprived them of an identity a little bit. I hate having to do videos like this because I have to be like, oh, just the guy's wife or Mrs. Whatchama-who's it. But anyway, George Chamberlain ran a theater, he had a wife, you know, he had a home, he had many of the facets that you think one would need to achieve the American dream, at least as we figure it should be. Well, he started getting a wild hair that turned out to not be so wild, that his wife was fooling around behind his back. And as it turned out, his wife had actually become associated and greatly fond of a young guy named Andrew Massin. I don't know why I'm saying a young guy. I don't know if he was a young guy. But anyway, a guy named Andrew Massin. They'd apparently actually met while she was at the theater her husband ran. I don't know how frequently she was there, but you know, maybe she stopped in from time to time. She met this Andrew Massin guy, and they hit it off. So I'm sure they probably encountered one another a lot in that facility while George Chamberlain was there. He probably became suspicious of their dynamic, their perceived relationship, however it appeared to them. And that, you know, I don't know if this guy had hard proof that his wife was fooling around on him, but anyway, the sensation built up more and more in him that his wife was fooling around on him. And in all likelihood, it was with this Andrew Massin character. So it's the evening. of December 14th, 1910. And again, you perceive Google Maps, when I reconfigured the address, put the house literally right where this lot is. So, it's evening. George Chamberlain tells his wife he's going to go down to the theater, do some work, convince her that he's leaving. Well, instead of actually leaving and going to work, he goes down the staircase at the front of their house here and then hides under the staircase. He said in the end he hid under there for like an hour and a half, and he was lying in wait. He was lying in wait. He was like, you know, I'm going to spy and I'm going to see if I can find the goods on my wife, to see if she's fooling around. And after about 90 minutes, who shows up and walks up the staircase up to the house here but Andrew Massin. Chamberlain, you know, sits under, listens to him tiptoe up, and then, you know, goes inside the house. And, you know, I wonder what's going through George Chamberlain's mind here. He said he waited a moment before he got up and entered the house, you know, to probably try to figure out exactly what he was going to do. And then he got up, went up the steps, walked into the house, tracked Andrew Massin and his wife to the back bedroom. They were both laying out leisurely on the bed, probably about to engage in some form of infidelity. He has a knife on him. George Chamberlain pulls a knife, calls out to Andrew Massin, demands, you know, he knows why he's there, but he's like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You know, what's going on? So Andrew Massin gets up and brandishes a gun. So you'd think George Chamberlain's in trouble. He literally brought a knife to a gunfight. And a scuffle breaks out against the two, and it seems that either Massin is too cowardly to shoot the gun, maybe he drops it in the scuffle, but he ends up being the guy that gets attacked. And before you know it, George Chamberlain has stabbed him several times. I want to say in the abdomen. And the scuffle, you know, processes forth to the point where he literally pushes Andrew Massin out of his house. He falls down the stairs because he's wounded and bleeding out and just lands on the ground. But he doesn't die there. They say he gets up and tries to make a run for it. They say that he tried to run down an alley, which I can see there's a space between these buildings right here. I don't know. There was presumably an alley in this vicinity at one time. Hey, I filmed a movie in this apartment building right here. Sorry, distractions. I just now realized where I am. So from the front of the George Chamberlain's house here, Andrew Massin tried to make a run for it, and he was just bleeding out too much, and he eventually just collapsed on the ground. I don't know if it was in an alleyway further back here or more out front along the sidewalk here, but he did collapse. And locals actually saw him, and they called the police because they thought there was like a drunken vagrant. They see a guy just passed out on the ground, and they thought it was a drunken vagrant. You know, alcoholism always permeates through society, but back in the day, you know, everybody in Portland was a drunk. You probably had just drunk vagrants lying all over the place all the time, whether they were homeless or not. And so that was the initial presumption, was people thought there was just a drunk vagrant who passed out, and they called the police, and of course authorities show up and see that he's got a bunch of stab wounds in his body and realize they have a whole different situation that they're gonna have to deal with here. And it is a very sad, tragic state of affairs what happened back here. This area right here, that's again where the Chamberlain home would have been. The case happened in 1910. This is a pretty old apartment building. I don't know if it quite dates back that far, but this might have been right next to their house. Their house might have been butted up against it, I'm not sure, but in the aftermath of the stabbing of Andrew Massin, who did ultimately, understandably, succumb to his wounds, or else it wouldn't be a Historic Murders of Portland episode, both George Chamberlain and his wife actually felt a lot of guilt in the aftermath. His wife, and it seemed like genuine guilt, not just like, oh, a guy died, oh, I guess I'm supposed to feel bad now for it. His wife, I think, when she saw what happened, what it drove her husband to, I think she felt a lot of, what the hell is that? Oh no, there's a loud vent. Ooh, what an old ghost sign. Anyway, it smells like bread. She felt a lot of genuine guilt, I think, when she saw what that drove her husband to. Usually, if one person in a relationship's gonna commit an infidelity against the other, it's usually because things are kind of starting to go south in the marriage, and maybe George Chamberlain's wife saw something that wasn't there, thought he was becoming disinterested, or something he did made her disinterested in him, and then seeing how much he was willing to fight for her, whether it was really him fighting for her, or just him being pissed because, you know, it's always a shameful thing when you have to go through that, especially back in 1910. But for whatever the reason, she felt really guilty about that, and in the end, George Chamberlain felt immensely guilty. He admitted to doing what he did, but he felt very guilty for what he had done in the aftermath. I think he probably was angry, wanted to have a confrontation with this guy, but unlike others, he admitted right away that he let the passion and the rage of the moment push him to doing something that he probably hoped he wouldn't have to do. I mean, he did show up with just a knife. You know, maybe he was just trying to scare the guy. Maybe he just wanted to run the guy off. Like, hey, get out of my house. Probably didn't know that Andrew Massin, showing up to engage in an affair with his wife, was also going to show up with a gun. But whatever the case, I think the stakes got a lot higher than George Chamberlain expected them to be, and that is why things ultimately went the way that they did. And now here, the conclusion. This is what really makes this story crazy. You fast forward 10 days afterwards, December 24th, 1910, a grand jury convenes to determine how to process forth in this case of George Chamberlain, who got into this scuffle with a guy and ended up stabbing him to death. You know, obviously probably a mix of jealousy, rage, confusion over the situation. He probably didn't actually expect to get into a knife fight with a guy with a gun, but worst case scenario, this is, you know, manslaughter. Killing of someone without intent. Maybe it's self-defense, but still, cases like these, they go to trial, so a jury can ultimately dictate what your punishment should be. But the grand jury, you know, before even going forward to him having a full-on trial, they actually deemed he should be released, and he was. Within 10 days of stabbing a guy to death, George Chamberlain was released with no repercussions. He was released back out on the streets, back out into society. I don't know how his marriage to his wife was after that, if they managed to rekindle the fire that maybe was lost, or if they managed to piece things back together. But yeah, the grand jury actually deemed he should be released, and he was. And according to the newspapers in Portland, I don't want to say this for dead certainty, but the newspapers in Portland said that this was the first time in the history of the country, history of the United States, 1910, don't even know if it's happened since, first time in the history of our country that a murderer was allowed to go free with no charge, no trial. That was what the newspapers reported. They said it was the first time in the history of America that had happened, where he didn't even go to trial for at least, you know, a manslaughter conviction or an acquittal based on self-defense. So if that is the case, that's absolutely wild, and that it came out of Portland, and it came out of such a strange set of circumstances. A killing like this. So, whatever way you want to look at it, George Chamberlain got off. And, you know, I hope he was grateful for it. I hope he led a good, clean life in the aftermath. I don't know how much longer he ran this theater, how much him and his wife stayed married, any of those questions, really. But hopefully things went all right for them. Palm tree. Those are very rare finds in Portland. I think they have to be planted like specifically, but you do find them from time to time. But anyway, no more further distractions. That is it. That is the story of the murder of Andrew Massin, a guy who got stabbed to death and then left on the sidewalk to die, pretty much. And his killer didn't even go to trial for it. Crazy, crazy city we live in now and almost 110 years ago. So as always, guys, thank you again for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe, Patreon, comment. I think I missed one. I don't know. But anyway, until next time, thanks again, guys, for watching another episode of Historic Murders of Portland with me, Steve the Amateur Historian. I'll catch you later.